Alright, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. You all kept asking and requesting that I bring this series back, so here we are. And y'all better watch these episodes too, because I really don't like to edit videos. But I want to jump into some music news. I saw the unofficial announcement about the Brandy and Monica collaboration tour that will also feature Kelly Rowland and Money Long. One, I think this is a really dope idea. Now, if you've been following my R&B is Dead series, I've definitely talked about collaborative tours in some previous episodes before, and I specifically talked about Brandy, Monica, and Kelly, and kept saying, for some reason, that would be a really dope show with the three of them. So I'm glad that it has come into fruition and somebody had the bright idea to go and make it happen. And so my one request, I will say, is that please just have one house band for everybody. Right? I just think it's a smoother transition. It's something about when you have these shows that have more than 3 acts on it. Once everybody starts having their own band and setup and staging, it just takes all day to set stuff up. And you get all hyped up with one of the acts, and then they get off the stage, and then you're sitting there for 20-30 minutes waiting for the next person. And it drags the show on. And I don't care how many times the DJ is going to play Poison or Candy Rain. Eventually, you're like, let's go with the show. And I say, because I think back to, I went to... it was like the R&B live or R&B only show or tour, whatever it was, where they put a bunch of R&B acts on a ticket and go all around the country. And at this specific show, it was 112, it was H-Town, it was Silk, it was Tevin Campbell, it was Tamar Braxton, it was Monica, and it was Escape. And as great as that lineup was, the show just dragged on because everybody had a band. Everybody had their own band, right? So, you know, H-Town is going to do their 3 songs, and then their band got to come off. Then, Silk got to set up their band and do, you know, their 4 or 5 songs they're going to do. And then you get through 112, and then Tevin Campbell, you know, has a longer set, so he has a bigger band, and he's going to do his set, and then it just takes all day. And as much as you enjoy all these acts, I'm like, wrap it up. And I just think it works better when there's a house band. I think back to when I went to the New Edition show. And again, it was Tank, it was Guy, Keith Sweat, and New Edition. And they had one house band for everybody. So just as Tank is getting off the stage, here comes Guy, and they're ready. Guy's doing their performance, and just as they get off stage and they're dragging Aaron Hall back to put his shirt on and going backstage because the show's over, here comes Keith Sweat. And just as Keith is saying, you know, thank you, good night, New Edition is coming out the floor. And so it was like everything just flowed. And so it just made it a great experience. Because, man, when I went to that other show I was talking about, Monica didn't even get on stage till like 11 o'clock. And then it's DC, so you know somebody gonna start fighting in the audience. So then Monica had to pause the show and try to get the people to calm down. And then Monica's set was over time, so she had to stop her set early. Like, just give us one big band. Just give us one big band, okay? Rate you and the crew like Showtime at the Apollo. Thank you very much. All right? But I think it'd be really dope. I like the idea of the intertwined show as well, where everybody, because I guess my theory would be Money Long is going to do her set by herself. They'll probably have her do her songs, and then they'll probably have Kelly do her set by herself, and my guess would be Brandy and Monica, if they were smart, would have the intertwined show. Even though I feel like throw Kelly in the mix with that too. Give me all 3 and let them wind it up. But I like the intertwined show. I just think it works really well because you can step out the box and do something different. Monica does a lot of touring. Like, a lot. Monica been on the road since I was 6. So, you know, I think having just a different kind of setup with, you know, Monica does some songs, Brandy does some songs, they do some songs together. I just think it helps a bit. And plus, I've seen both of them many times. I think I've seen Monica 4 or 5 times. I've seen Brandy like 6 times in the last few years. And so, you know, I just think, you know, giving us something different will be really dope. But I think it'd be a great addition to the summer concert lineup series that they have going with all the different acts that are going on the road in the summer and the fall. And I hope the tour is a success, right? I'm really looking forward to see Kelly. I've never seen Kelly in a full concert. I've seen her at the BET Honors when she did the Mariah Carey tribute. But as far as like Kelly doing her own set, I've never seen a full Kelly show. But Kelly has 2 of my favorite R&B albums, Talk a Good Game and Miss Kelly. So I'm looking forward to seeing her. And hopefully it's giving me flashbacks. Can I tell you, I do got one beef with Kelly that I had to get over. Remember in 07 when they had that BET Awards? Now, this is back when I used to really be into what was current. And I was really rooting for Kelly because I was getting mad because nobody was really supporting the Miss Kelly album. So I really wanted her to blow up because I thought it was such a nice contemporary R&B album. And so that was the performance where they said, oh, and Kelly Rowland's going to be performing. I'm like, yeah, great. But it was a collaborative performance. So it was Beyonce and Kelly together. I was like, now y'all... And listen, Beyonce's Beyonce, we get it, right? Beyonce has the larger-than-life everything. So Beyonce done came out of robots, and Monique done came out on the stage and everything. And so Kelly gets to her part. Kelly does her set, and then at the very end, it's when they bring everybody. So it was Kelly in one box, or they split the screen into the 4 sections. It was Kelly in one section, Michelle from Destiny Child in another section, Beyonce, and Solange. And mind you, all the other 3 are in their little square getting it in, right? Solange just and Beyonce's doing her Beyonce thing. Even Michelle was there just busting it and thrusting it, and she a gospel girl, right? Getting it. What was Kelly up there doing? Kelly was doing this little shoulder. This was Kelly. I was like, oh, I was so mad at her. Anyway, she redeemed herself the next time she did motivation, but I was so mad. Every time I see that performance, I get triggered, because it's like you see the other 3 just getting it in, Kelly with this shoulder. Actually, now that I think about it, Kelly, you could actually do that during this concert just for the nostalgia. But I'm looking forward to that show. So God willing, it's a real thing. I enjoy Money Long's music as well. Please check out her album. She has a nice project as well. So I'm looking forward to it. So we will see how this goes. I will definitely get tickets and tell you all about it. I suggest you all go as well. Support all of these R&B acts while they're out here giving us their all, right? Because for some reason, the industry is whacking all of our R&B artists right now. So good luck to all of them. Also, condolences and best wishes to everyone who's been affected by the extreme weather, specifically those who've been hit by these tornadoes. We just saw a tornado touch down in St. Louis. And again, it's always scary when tornadoes touch down in more densely populated areas, because it creates a greater opportunity for there to be more tragedy, unfortunately. And in this case, from last time I checked, the numbers coming out of St. Louis, there were 5 confirmed casualties, and that number may go up or go down. But we've seen tornadoes hit St. Louis. We've seen one in Baltimore. They haven't confirmed whether that was an EF1 or EF2 yet, but it most likely was an EF1. You've seen some in Kentucky. You've seen some in Colorado, Virginia. And again, it's tornado season, so we're going to see a lot of them. The U.S. averages about 1,200 tornadoes per year. But some of the research that I was seeing coming out of 2023 is actually that what we deem as Tornado Alley has actually shifted about 400 to 500 miles towards the east. So thinking back to when you just go back to the 90s or the 80s and you often heard the phrase Tornado Alley, you often thought of that segment of Oklahoma and Texas, that oval-shaped region of about northern Texas through the rest of Oklahoma. You often think of that area and then the area surrounding, but it seems like what would be that eye has shifted further to the east. And now you're seeing an increase not only in just tornadoes, but also the power within the tornadoes. So rather than seeing the EF0 1s and 2s, you're starting to see a lot more EF3, 4, and 5s in places like Missouri and Arkansas and western Tennessee and western Kentucky and northern Mississippi and northern Alabama. And unfortunately, with the changes in weather and what we've seen happen in climate change, we're going to continue to see different adjustments. So people that live in places like Arizona and New Mexico are actually starting to see fewer tornadoes. It doesn't mean that they don't exist anymore, but it seems like a lot of the concentrated area where you're seeing a lot of tornadoes strike and hit down, especially the more powerful ones, are starting to shift further towards the east and a little bit toward the south. And what makes it scary is this is happening just as we have an administration that's making cuts to all of the services that help to prevent casualty and also bring what you call remedy or aid after these things. So we've seen the cuts with FEMA. FEMA, at one point when it was established in 1966, the goal of FEMA was for the federal government to cover 75% of all of the expenses after there's any kind of natural disaster, whether it be an earthquake or a flood or hurricane, tornado. It's always been 75% from the federal government. The states cover the rest. We're now coming into a space where the current administration wants to get rid of FEMA and just leave it all up to the states. If you watched my last live, we talked about how there are some states that honestly just can't afford to do so, because there are some states that are federally dependent because more than 50% of their revenue comes from the federal government. And so that's going to be an issue. If we talk about a state like Louisiana, more than 50% of their revenue comes from the federal government. And so the idea of the government pulling out in moments like this, especially as we're getting ready to come into hurricane season as well, and Louisiana is hurricane prone, this is a horrible idea in my opinion. I'm just, because again, you want the states to now not only fund disaster relief, because again, sometimes when you have something like a hurricane or these tornadoes that take out entire cities or entire regions, damages in the hundreds of millions, sometimes the billions of dollars. And not every state has the budget to kind of pull something like this off. But in addition to the cuts at FEMA, now you also have the National Weather Service, where 500 people have been out of there, right? So you've seen the cuts at the National Weather Service. Even when we're talking about St. Louis, the people that were working in that region at the National Weather Service, they had a limited staff. It didn't affect them with how they did their jobs, but they had to do things a little bit more strenuously because they didn't have the same team that was there. And so you're going to start seeing a lot of these agencies that have been getting the cut through Doge and everything else be stretched very thin. And it doesn't stop there, because you also have the NOAA that has also received a 27% cut. And what sucks about that, as far as the cut with the NOAA, this is what's really giving us our insight about when hurricanes are forming over the Atlantic Ocean or what's happening in the Pacific Ocean. But the worst part with that cut is that 74% of that 27% cut came from the side that does the research, the part that's giving us the insight of what we can do to prepare for these different things when a storm is coming, or the different signs that we can look for. And so again, the NOAA, that's the National Oceanic Atmosphere Administration, they've just been getting gutted and cut. And it's crazy when you look at what's happened with Doge, because it's almost like they just said, we're just going to go in here and just cut everything. We're not going to really look at cause and effect. We're not going to look at how, even if we think this doesn't affect us, it's going to affect us. They just said, no, just get in there and cut everything. And so what sucks with that NOAA cut is also that, you know, this was a 57-year-old partnership that they had with Princeton University. And we're also in this era where you're starting to see universities get federal funding yanked and cut, and anything that deals with science or anything in relation to climate change, because that's really why all these cuts are coming. When you talk about the Project 2025 nonsense, anything with any ties to climate change is getting gutted and cut. So in the same way that they have the DEI war, climate change is another thing. And so we're coming into this space where everything is all about profits, profits, and profits. There are other national climate models, but they also appear to be in jeopardy of losing funding. The National Science Foundation supports the National Center for Atmospheric Research, but the foundation announced it was freezing all research grants on April 18th. NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies has a model, but the institute could see cuts of up to 47%. And the Department of Energy, home to a fourth climate modeling system, is also under budget pressure. Without the models and all the sensor networks and supporting NOAA research programs that feed them, we'll go back to the technical proficiency levels we had in the 1950s, said Craig McLean, a 40-year-old veteran of the NOAA who until 2022 was the agency's top administrator for research and its acting chief scientist. We won't have the tools we have today because we can't populate them by people or by data. And so it's really just a sign of the times that we're living in. When you have administrations that kind of move recklessly, the people are collateral. And unfortunately, we're going to kind of see things get a lot worse. And who knows what this hurricane season is about to look like. And so, God willing, everybody will be all right. But again, this is why I always say you're going to have to be active with regard to what's happening around you. Getting into the space of just wanting to sit out or thinking nothing is going to affect me. Eventually, everything that's happening will affect all of us to some extent in some capacity. So it's more important to kind of lock in and just kind of pay attention to where we are and recognize the things that we as individuals can do to kind of fight what this system is currently doing to screw us all over. Anyway, moving on. And then when it comes to the big house at the Nottoway Plantation burning down. Womp womp. Here's my thing. What I found so interesting is as I was looking at the commentary on social media and just seeing some of the commentary, it was very interesting to see a lot of white Americans go and say, oh my God, this is history under fire. We're losing bits of history. We must, they were getting campaigns to donate and raise funds, and I offer to help rebuild. They're breaking their necks to try to get this thing rebuilt and save and salvage whatever's left, because it's all a part of history, because history is so important. I said, really? Because we've just lived through the last 2-3 years of anti-CRT and anti-woke, and we're watching them gut all the DEI stuff. We watched them show up at school board meetings with AR-15s, pissed off because Black history was being taught. We watched governors erase AP Black history out of curriculums. We've watched librarians be arrested and libraries lose funding and libraries be closed, all in the name of them telling stories that they didn't want to be out there because that history wasn't important, and so we can get rid of that element. We've watched universities cave and just jump into some nonsense, all to assure that they can appease the racist white folks who decided that history was no longer important because it didn't make them look good. But I'm going to tell you the history that they're trying to preserve in this. What Nottoway Plantation represents is white wealth. It represents power. It represents the idea of maintaining order. It represents the idea of what a lot of white Americans would like to see themselves connected to when it comes to wealth. But the part that they don't want to acknowledge is that wealth came from what? Came from slavery. It came from the oppression of other groups of people, specifically Black folks. It came from the oppressions of everything that took place with regard to wanting to generate revenue at the expense of somebody else by using free Black labor. And so when it comes to the Nottoway Plantation, that's why you're seeing the grand ballrooms and they're hosting weddings there, and it can serve as a hotel space. And yes, it's a museum, but they're not really talking about the realities of everything. And even when they do mention and talk about slavery, it's so watered down because they more so want to highlight the family that owned the plantation. They want to highlight the wealth that was generated throughout the years, because this is a plantation that's centered on sugarcane. The original owners of the plantation initially were from Virginia, and they focused on cotton. And they were like, you know what? Cotton is not bringing us enough money. We can make a whole lot more if we go further south. And so boom, now they end up in White Castle, Louisiana, and here's this plantation. And not only that, they get those who were enslaved to build the plantation, right? And so they build this plantation, and then it's there for all these years. And again, for me, places like the Nottoway Plantation are a symbol of oppression. And so if we're talking about the contrast, because I agree with the idea of preserving history, but I also agree with the idea of telling the truth and not watering things down and trying to sugarcoat. And in this current era where we've watched anything associated with black oppression be taken out of the conversation to try to paint the idea that things weren't so bad, that should kind of tell you something. And again, it brings back the conversation of why do you think people like to run from history? Because history creates the conversation that leads people into asking why. Why did this happen? And how did this happen? Not, in addition to when did this happen, but why and how. And when you get to the why and the how, now you get to the origins, and you continue to open different Pandora's boxes. Because if you start talking about slavery and you start talking about what it is that they had to deal with, it leads to different conversations about the compound interest that built with wealth on the backs of those who were enslaved, and how it really pretty much created the United States economy. And then it gets into different conversations about, well, what about when slavery was over with, but those systems were still in place? And then we end up getting sharecropping and everything that happened in the Nadir period. And again, we continue to watch what you call the imperialism of the United States continue to expand at the expense of black folks, who had to put all of their labor, hard sweat, and work into it with no payout. And so when you get to that point, then people start saying, well, dang, this was really messed up. What can we do to make it better? Then you get into the real conversations, because now we're talking about things that are structural. We're talking about things that are systemic. We're talking about compensation, reparations, things people don't want to hear about. And so they'd rather just shut all that down and not even talk about it, which is why there has been an attack on history for the last decade, which is why you're seeing what has happened in all these different places, whether it be libraries, again, getting threatened or being shut down, or librarians being arrested, universities changing their curriculums, schools changing their curriculums, CRT hotlines being created in the state of Virginia. That's now falling apart because it wasn't successful. They kept trolling the line, Governor Youngkin. But all these different things to try to suppress history and keep it watered down, because they didn't want things to be put out there. And so when you look in contrast to a place like the Whitney Plantation, which is one of the plantations that we just talked about 2 lives ago, where again, this is a plantation which was even bigger. This was a plantation that had 350 enslaved people. But when you go to this Whitney Museum, it's not a celebration of that time period. It's highlighting the atrocities that happened to those who were enslaved on those plantations, and what life was like for those who had to live and operate as people being enslaved under somebody else. It wasn't this romanticized Nottoway Plantation idea where, because for some reason people just love to romanticize the antebellum period. It was just a great time of the antebellum period and love was in the air. And I'm like, white women, did you forget what life was like during the antebellum period? Y'all were getting knocked upside the head by your husbands. You didn't have a say in anything. You had no political power. You weren't allowed to really do any work. You really weren't allowed to have much of an education. Your husbands cheated on you. You had no agency over anything. But for some reason, you all have watered down that narrative and painted it to be a romantic novel. I don't know if it's because y'all been watching too many movies or what, but be for real. And that's just the white women. We already know what was happening to black folks during that period, especially the black women, right? So in addition to your husband stepping out on you, they were over here sexually assaulting and raping our women and making babies with them, and then making those babies go and work. And again, I suggest you all go and read the book, They Were Her Property, because again, white women, y'all were not exempt from the nonsense when it came to the oppressions that took place when we talk about something like slavery and what happened to those who worked those plantations involuntarily. And so what's also funny, when we talk about the Whitney Plantation, the Whitney Plantation has also lost 2 federal grants because, again, this falls under the current administration's executive orders when it comes to getting rid of any conversations about DEI or anything that's too woke or anything that has to do with black anything. So, again, this is a plantation museum that is actually losing funding because it's telling the truth. So it's interesting to see the contrast where you have one venue that's really laying it out there where you can actually get an education about what was happening then, and they lose federal funding, and the other place is celebrated. And because it is now burned down, or at least the big house has, everybody wants to go in their wallet and help rebuild. And they're not going to go and rebuild the truth. They're rebuilding again the, what I call like the illusion of grandeur. Like they would like to rebuild that whimsical, magical space of wealth and success and power. That's what they're celebrating. That's what they're standing behind. Crazy. And so I really think people have to really sometimes, even when we're talking about slavery, because it's something that's brushed over so much, I don't think people ever really just sit and just take a handful of instances out of the experience of slavery and really sit with just how terrible it would have been. We don't really do that. And I think it's because, one, there's a reason why I don't like to use the word slaves, because I think the phrase slave takes away the agency of mindset. And it creates a space where those who are enslaved are seen as pretty much items that have no agency, that have no personality. And so it's easier to put them in a bubble or just make them a statistic or just talk about them like they're a herd. But again, when we're talking about the Nottoway Plantation, there were 176 people who were enslaved on that plantation. And so when you're just talking about that experience, even when we talk about the idea of people being sold off, really sit and saturate with that. Picture if your best friend were to leave and move to another state or to another country because they got a new job. In modern times, yeah, you're a little sad, but you have options. You can book a flight and go visit them. You can call, you can text, you can FaceTime, you can email, you can hit them up on social media. You have all these options and outlets to connect with them. However, during this time period, there was none of that. And a lot of times when somebody was sold off, you never saw them again. Just imagine being married and the love of your life gets sold off. They send her off to some plantation in another state or another city somewhere far off, or send him off wherever they send him, and you're never really sure if you're going to see them again. Like, what do you do in that moment? Do you hold out on hope with the idea that eventually they're going to come back? And so you never remarry, you never find love again, you never court anybody else because you're holding out for them? Or do you have to bite that bullet and press forward and say, okay, well, it is what it is, let me move on? Like, this is the reality for people. And I think people forget that there were many who were enslaved that never even got the opportunity to leave the plantation. So there are some who spent their entire life locked into the same however many hundreds of yards for their entire life, their whole life. Think about those of you who live in big cities and you're like, man, I'm so tired of Houston. Like, I mean, I'm just over this. And mind you, Houston is like bigger than a whole planet, right? And Houston just ain't enough for you. I told you guys the last time I went to Houston, I was out there for like a few days because I went for the rodeo. Had a ball. My friend took me everywhere. We went to every place, everything. I had a ball. And they were like, yeah, we never even left Third Ward. I said, what? That was just Third Ward? We didn't even get the... Right. And again... So imagine like you're locked into a space that's the size of, 2 or 3 football fields, and that's it. That's it. That is your life. Every day you wake up, you see the same people and do the same thing every day. Every day. Like, really sit every day. You're probably eating the same thing you don't get too many options for food either. Like, you got to really sit and kind of think about that kind of stuff. And I don't think people really grasp that concept when it comes to something like slavery, because it's talked about in such a manner where it's more so about like numbers and stats and, oh, well, this many people were enslaved. Oh, when the Civil War ended, there was 4 million people who were enslaved that was set free. We're never talking about it from that humane aspect. Again, 176 people tied to this plantation. That's 176 different personalities, different stories, different lives, different backgrounds. And people never really understand that. So when I see people breaking their necks to say, oh, well, we must preserve history. But which part are you preserving and which part are you celebrating? That's the question. And so even folks are like, well, no, we like to host the weddings here because these buildings are historic. I mean, you can get married in all kind of historic buildings. You don't got to do it at a plantation big house. You can go right to Charleston, South Carolina, or Savannah, or all of these southern cities, and they have these big, giant colonial homes that were not plantations that literally have the same makeup. And you can have all kind of weddings and cha-cha slide or whatever you want to do up in there. But it's very interesting to just see how that moves. So, to me, I see a place like the Nottoway Plantation as a, symbolic, or it's a symbol of just oppression. Nothing good came from it. You created wealth for one demographic of people at the expense of the other. And the other demographic is still reeling from that in modern times. We could go into a really deep dive about all that and connect this all, but we're not going to do that because we've done it a million times on this channel. But just understand, slavery was just the first domino. And then we still were subject to tons and tons of nonsense. And just, again, I have no sympathy, empathy for anything about Nottoway Plantation. Good riddance, right? And it's interesting that the big house is the only portion that burned up. I said, symbolic, right? Some of the ancestors got tired of the nonsense. Y'all was in there just celebrating a little too much over there. Anyway, moving on. And then I've been following the story with the inmates that escaped the prison in Louisiana. Initially, I think it was 10 or 11 of them. They've already caught 4 of them. And I said, yeah, y'all didn't want to be free. Y'all out here playing. Because why are all y'all still in the area? Like, what? But, like, I saw, like, one of them, first of all, he goes on live. Like, you get caught, and then you going to go on social media and let everybody know that you out. You partying with your friends. I was like, okay. All right, between that and the guy that was on the park bench taking a nap, I said, okay, y'all didn't want to be free. Y'all didn't map this out. Like I am not one to give advice in these moments, but dang, y'all supposed to map this out before you broke out, right? I don't know. They ain't watch enough movies as children. I don't know, because it just makes me think. Like even when again, my favorite movie has always been Set It Off. I just always think back to that first robbery. And then when Jada was fussing at everybody for spending their money, because she was like, yeah, that was supposed to be the money that we used to get up out of here. But they only all had $3,000 each. It's like, where were you going? $3,000, that'll get you somewhere, but then what? You're going to be calling Nate Andrews again. And so, this is an interesting story to follow. I said, homeboy really went on live. We out, y'all. I'm like, y'all on Bourbon Street. Y'all out, what y'all doing? Y'all at the hookah bar? Y'all was supposed to be in Mexico by now. Somewhere. Y'all didn't have... This was not thought out. There's supposed to be a cousin that was waiting with the van, and you do whatever. But so be it. To each his own. Then we get to RG3, who I personally feel chooses to be purposely obtuse and then get mad when he catches some smoke and plays dumb and likes to play the victim. But anyway, so as we know, there was a WNBA game, and in this game you had Angel Reese and you had Caitlin Clark. Now, the two of them are competitive rivals, right? They're two of the biggest names in the WNBA along with Asia Wilson and a few others. And so every time that these two have some kind of game together, you notice that attendance is a little bit higher, there's a little bit more on the line, and so the games sometimes get a little intense. And fouls happen, people cuss each other out, somebody might get pushed a little bit, and it's what you see at any basketball game, any football game, any game where there's some kind of foul or somebody is a little too rough or they roughhouse too much. It's just that tense kind of energy that's there. Anyway, during this game, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark kind of have their back and forth. At some point, Angel Reese gets a really flagrant foul from Caitlin Clark. And Angel's like, you know what, you got about one more time, right? And so she kind of bucks up, and Caitlin, does her little buck up thing, and that's the end of that. RG3. Can I read the statement? Because again, RG3 for some reason loves to overanalyze all these things. So here we go. After watching Caitlin Clark's flagrant foul on Angel Reese and the aftermath, there is no way Angel Reese can continue to lie that she doesn't dislike Caitlin Clark. I know what hatred looks like. Angel Reese hates, in caps, Caitlin Clark. Not some basketball rivalry hate either. Hate. And then he went on and did like 2 or 3 videos and doubled down and made all these different videos and statements all about Angel Reese and the hatred that she has because he's somebody who wants to kumbaya with everybody, so on and so forth, and everything like that. And of course, people are like, what are you talking about? Who's... Okay, whatever. But anyway, Ryan Clark then follows up and kind of gives his 2 cents about just how RG3 moves very weird and kind of brings up a few different things about, like, well, it's also noticeable that RG3 is somebody who's never going to really be able to relate to, a conversation with black women because, one, he hasn't really married any, and then in addition to that, he's just not in a space to really understand the bigger picture when it comes to race and gender, especially in sports in the United States. And so... Can we just dig a little deeper? Because then that pissed off RG3 and he made a response video. Now, mind you, when RG3 made the initial video going even deeper into why he feels that Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark, and he's invested in this. He's making this video. The wife is in the back just nodding along. And I'm just like, okay. All right. So I'm so glad Ryan Clark said something. I'm like, finally, somebody gets it. Please go back and watch that clip of Ryan Clark because Ryan Clark, thank you. But here's the thing. What I've always said when it comes to race in America, especially when you're talking about just any conversation, whether it's in entertainment, whether it's in sports, whether it's in academia, there's always white folks waiting in the wings for permission to say what they really think. And so a lot of times, a lot of folks will not jump out there until one of us do it. And what I mean by that is they're waiting for that token black Negro to go out there and say exactly what it is that they're saying because it indirectly gives them permission to go out there and jump into the racism. Full throttle, full voiced, full throated, right? And so, it's kind of like when they all are sitting and they're waiting like, okay, well, Did Terry Crews say something yet? Okay, no Terry. Okay, what about Stephen A. Smith? Did he say something yet? No. RG3 just said, go. And next thing you know, it's all the racist tweets, and all of a sudden Angel Reese is ghetto and blah, 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 blah. They do this all the time. And so when we talk about somebody like Caitlin Clark, right? Now, Caitlin Clark is a great basketball player, and this is not to attack her, but unfortunately, she represents white America's desire to want to humble somebody black, which is Angel Reese. And so many of the people who became Caitlin Clark fans did not become fans because of how great she was or how she had a really great run when she was an undergrad, but more so for the fact that they got introduced to Caitlin Clark because Angel Reese did this to her face. That's most of their introduction. And because of that, it's something that enrages them where they see a black girl doing this to the white girl, because now all of a sudden the white girl's going to be the innocent victim in everything, right? It's kind of like the Taylor Swift treatment with Kanye. Now, another conversation, but again, that same kind of wave where, you know, when you get the damsel in distress that's a white woman at the expense or at the hands of the angry black woman, it's on and popping. And so the minute that took place with this right here, you watch jersey sales skyrocket. All of a sudden, attendance skyrocketed at all the games. Everybody wants to see Caitlin Clark. She's a hero because, again, she represents that idea in America's desire to humble somebody like an Angel Reese. And so, unfortunately, for somebody like Angel Reese, she has to bear the brunt of white aggression whether she wants to or not. And so when she's going to these games, there's all kind of slurs being thrown out there. People are there to specifically boo her, right? She has to carry the weight of white anger, whether she wants to or not. And again, even with Caitlin Clark, this is not something that Caitlin signed up for and said, everybody go get them. But again, she represents that. And because I've said this a million times, y'all can get as mad as you want. The only time white people get on code is when it's time to be racist. That's the only time they move as a collective. Other than that, they are individualistic on everything. It's you figure it out. Good luck, folks. That's just what it is. That's the country we live in. You may not like that I said that, but I don't know what to tell you. It's the reality. And we see it each and every time again when we just watch the news. When we look at politics, when we look at the policy that white America collectively gets behind, it is what it is. You've often seen that pattern. You've seen it with the aggression that's always taken place towards black women in sports that really like to utilize their agency. We saw the aggression that took place against somebody like a Serena Williams. We saw how Sha'Carri Richardson was treated. They didn't care that the girl's mama died. Too bad. Let her have it, right? Even Simone Biles, right? She was a sweetheart, but then when she started getting the twisties and she used her agency to say, actually, I can't do this because I'm not trying to injure myself. I'm not feeling myself. Now everybody thinks they own her. They want to cuss her out, right? Because she wasn't able to compete that year. And so you constantly see that. And so what's interesting when I look at somebody like an RG3 who gets it wrong every time when it comes to race. Every time he gets it wrong. And it's almost like what I always say. It's like you're waiting for your white appreciation certificate to come in the mail and it's not coming. And so my issue is you have people in the black collective who feel that proximity to whiteness will grant them more access to wealth and grant them more access to opportunity. And so there are some who overcompensate because they recognize that in order to gain that proximity to whiteness, you have to keep white Americans comfortable. You have to keep them in a space where race never comes up. And if race does come up, it's always something symbolic. It's a Martin Luther King, we are the world conversation, and it stops there. We're not going to talk about a Martin Luther King, I feel like we led the folks into a burning house and white people have lost their minds, Martin Luther King. They're not going to talk about that. It's always something symbolic. And so many people know that and play that role. And so they love to do this kind of raceless, ambiguous, safe for digestion character, and RG3 has been that. And so anytime you see RG3 bring up a conversation of race, it's always in a space where he kind of paints it like racism doesn't exist. And we recently saw an example of this with the conversation that took place around Jackie Robinson when his name was removed from the Department of Defense website. And then, of course, there's the backlash and people are like, what the heck is this about? And then RG3 goes and tweets, sports shows on TV should be about sports, not politics. This tweet is not about Jackie Robinson. His significance can never and should never be erased. Breaking the color barrier in baseball in itself is not political. Jesse Owens winning 4 gold medals in itself was not political. Jack Johnson becoming the first black boxing heavyweight champ in itself was not political. They all had political ramifications. They all challenged the status quo of racial barriers to fair play, race relations, and civil rights. That should always be acknowledged and never forgotten. They shouldn't be used as an excuse to push political agendas on sports shows on national television to an audience there to consume sports content. And I said, okay, see, I already know what kind of game you're playing, because one, those are probably 3 of the worst examples to use, especially if you're going to talk Jack Johnson. There was literally a race riot / massacre after he won the heavyweight title. So let's be for real. I talked about that on 2 lives ago, so go back to the live where I talk about RG3 and all the different examples with those sports references. But anyway, I say all that to say, He is somebody that, again, he will overcompensate. And he only will talk about race if it means that he can kind of work in the favor of the status quo that's already out there. So he's somebody that's happy to be in a room. He's going to ask you how high does he need to jump in order to stay in good graces with everybody. Because notice, every single time that he has a conversation about race, it's always against black people collectively, specifically against black women. I don't know what his issue is, but he got a lot going on. So anyway, you have Ryan Clark, who says his 2 cents. And Ryan Clark says the bit about, well, I think, again, he may not also be able to relate because he's just not around black women. And because, again, he's married to 2 different white women, not at the same time, but his previous wife and his current wife are both white women. There's not those conversations at home about what it is that a black woman is going to deal with. And I think what Ryan Clark is getting at is anybody else who's in a situation where you're married to a black woman or you got somebody that lives with you that's a black woman, she's going to tell you all about her day at work. She's going to tell you about all the different things that she deals with, and you get insight into her perspective of her experience through her daily journey and matriculation through life. RGIII doesn't have that. Somehow, RGIII takes offense. Now, mind you, he had a few statements on Angel Reese because I only read the first one. I mean, he wrote like this long 8-paragraph tweet. I'm just going to skim through some of it. Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark. It's staring us all right in the face, but people are afraid to say it. Won't answer questions about Caitlin Clark. Gets mad when people praise Caitlin Clark for the explosion of popularity around women's basketball. Celebrates when her teammates flagrantly foul Caitlin Clark. Goes after and tries to punch Caitlin Clark after a routine make them earn it foul. After Angel Reese fouled Aaliyah Boston with a push in the back that wasn't called. That's not just hate. That's jealousy and resentment. Some people get uncomfortable when you say Angel Reese hates or is jealous of Caitlin Clark because of the complex racial history of America and historical stereotypes of the angry, jealous black woman. I understand that. If you understood that, you'd shut the hell up. Angel Reese isn't just some jealous black woman. Angel is an NCAA champion and a great basketball player. She's a competitor who has shown she doesn't like how Caitlin Clark is crowned while she's criticized for showing the same confidence and fire in her own way. That's not an assumption. That's what Angel Reese has said and shown us all. And yeah, that can turn into hate, jealousy, and resentment. That's what makes this rivalry real to a lot of viewers. Caitlin Clark is the most popular athlete in America, and Angel Reese is the Isaiah Thomas to Caitlin Clark's Michael Jordan. That's what will continue to raise the popularity of the WNBA. People care about rivalries. Rivalries aren't built on handshakes. They are forged in fire, fouls, and pride. Angel Reese wants to beat and outshine Caitlin Clark. Angel Reese has said she is the villain. That is sports. That's the game. Angel Reese has beat Caitlin Clark, but never outshined her. Even when Angel won the national title, the First Lady wanted to see her and Caitlin Clark at the White House. Over time, the hate and resentment has built up from all this. You can see it in her overreaction to the routine basketball play foul. I'm just the one not afraid to say it. What I find so interesting is he has so much energy for this because, again, he also went and did his podcast or his videos and kept responding and doing these 2 and 3 minute videos, just going even deeper into this because for some reason he's very invested in this. He's losing sleep at night over this. But it's just so interesting that he's full-throated with this, but then when it comes to actual conversations about race, he gets all scary and wants to play kumbaya. But the thing that I'll say, even if Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark or if she hated her or didn't like her, who cares? So then my question becomes, what are your intentions of trying to bring attention to the fact that you think that she doesn't like this woman? What is it that you want to happen? Because that's really what's being put out on the plate. You're pretty much giving the signal for folks to go and pound on this girl, mainly because you feel some kind of way because you think that Caitlin Clark is not getting coddled enough by Angel Reese. And you think Angel Reese has too much of an ego. And so now you're using your platform where you know your core audience is a bunch of white folks, because it ain't us, right? A bunch of white folks, and you're pretty much giving them the signal to say, go get her. That's really what you're doing. And that's why you're spending so much time. And even as people kind of argue you down on social media saying, no, that's not this, and so on and so forth, you're not backing down. You want to be writing this so bad because you recognize it puts you in good grace with, again, white America. That's really what that's about. Because, again, Angel Reese hasn't really said a whole lot, but you decided that you're all of a sudden Dr. Phil and you can analyze, because he got a tweet on there too. I was looking, where's the analyze tweet? Let me pull that up too. I gave a sports opinion. I said Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark based on repeated visible actions on the court and in press conferences. I backed it up with 5 separate examples from the game of basketball because that's what I do. I analyze sports. I stay in the arena. Just because Angel Reese is black doesn't mean that her game and actions cannot be critiqued. So he's locked into this 10 toes down. This is the hill he wants to die on. And so it's interesting. So after Ryan Clark gives his 2 cents about everything, now RG3 wants to all of a sudden respond. But it's interesting because then when he opens this video, it's yo, it's your boy. I'm like, no, use your code switching voice you use on TV all day. Don't come pander to come back to us now. But again, it's interesting because then RG3 decides that his response is going to be about the fact that Ryan Clark brought up the fact that RG3 has a white wife. And so RG3 thinks this is all centered about his wife, and so he's mad because he feels that his wife has been attacked. And so he releases this long statement. And so of course when this statement comes out, you know, it's this long tweet that's like 20 paragraphs. And again, he has a video because now he feels that his wife has been attacked. And this is the lowest of low. You never go after the wife and children. And I'm like, nobody has said anything negative about the wife or the child. Ryan Clark even complimented your wife, said she was a nice person. He's talking about the fact that, again, you sit on your platform, and my thing is this: the minute you let your wife sit in the video in the back and she's head nodding and agreeing, then I'm sorry, she's fair game. If you didn't want your wife to be a part of the conversation, she would have been in the background. And I don't know why you had her there to begin with if this is supposed to be about sports and your actual business. That's not her thing. So why would you subject her to that and then get mad when she's also catching the smoke? Because again, her just head nodding in agreement, again, that continues to maintain the status quo that everybody's talking about to begin with. So then you want to sit here and center this entire conversation about your wife now, when in reality, all of this started because you got so much smoke for Angel Reese that you're trying to get hordes of people to go and say whatever negative things you would like them to say about her, because you have convinced yourself and you want to convince everybody else that Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark. And again, even if she did, who cares? But again, the question really becomes, what is the end goal here? By you trying to paint this out, what is it that you're trying to do? Because we know in sports, a lot of athletes don't like each other, especially when it comes to the men's sports. When we talk NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, all of them, there's lots of athletes who hate each other. And it's never something that's painted like, oh my God, they have to like each other. I don't see you going to bat about what other players are doing with who they don't get along with. But for some reason, Angel Reese just gets under your skin, where all of a sudden you want to play respectability politics. And this is the problem that we have. This is how we've gotten to where we've gotten to when it comes to race in the United States. When you want to talk about these extremities that we're living through right now, it's because of people like an RG3 who try to paint everything to be, oh, it's not that bad, and you give inches to nonsense. And then at the same time, anytime you want to talk about race, it's against your own collective, because again, you're trying to appear to be one of the good ones, right? You're a part of the problem. And so again, folks can sit here and say, oh no, we need to come together and be loving. And that was the goal. That's what we were taught coming up, especially for millennials. That was the whole post-racial thing. But the problem was, while we were being blinded by love, policy was doing this thing in the background. And here we are in 2025 with the nonsense. So I really don't want to hear a whole lot about coming together and kumbaya. I can be cordial, but I know what it is that I'm living through and where I live and what we're up against as far as black folks. And so RG3 wants to be in La La Land. Let him stay over there. But please stop utilizing your own people for your own personal gain. Because this ain't about no Angel Reese. You're just trying to find ways to continue to pull different nuggets that make you seem like a digestible black person for white people to enjoy, so that you can keep your paycheck and keep your wife and her family happy. So you can be invited to the Thanksgiving table and not sit in the car. Bunch of nonsense. Anyway, for those asking about the book club, I'll put out some selections in the next few weeks for you guys to vote on, and that way we'll lock in what the next selection will be as we get closer toward the end of the summer, and that's when we'll pick up the book club. I have a little bit of traveling to do, and I'm also working on a few projects, so I really can't lock into the book club for June, or most likely even July. So we'll kind of get to it when it gets there, but life is lifing, so I can't complain. As opportunities come, I gotta take them. And so yeah, share your 2 cents. We'll be back on a live, I want to say either at the end of this week or next week. And yeah, anyway, the next thing I'm working on is the next Comedically Hard-Headed podcast episode that needs to come out this week. And so yeah, just bear with me. I'm trying to make it all happen. We gonna get there. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.